You're live. Good evening, lovely people and leprechauns. And yes, the title was Modwain wasn't sure whether to be awake for the stream, but he is, which is great news. And he has been sorely missed.
Yeah, well,
but not missed because we thank Ludicrous Leprechaun for his fantastic performance on Wednesday. So we both missed Modwain and we didn't miss Modwain. Because we have to say both things at the same time.
It was a good run, though. I mean, I didn't see it live, but I did see it.
Well,
and I then, Michael.
Well, it was quite ironic because I decided, seeing as you weren't there, to start it at 10 my time instead of half 10.
30.
Yeah, and then exactly after an hour, Michael Keller goes, "Oh, the Honey Badgers have started streaming," and I thought, well, we were running out of things to say. So half of us all went over. So there was Michael Keller, Richard Bear, myself, and Ludicrous Leprechaun all suddenly appeared in the Honey Badger stream chat. And I would just like to say I really enjoyed Anxious Oz's stream of some insane people in Canberra last night. Was it last night? I get confused.
2 nights ago?
No. I think it was last night.
It's kind of funny though because
so it was this morning. It was this morning to her, but it was last night to us.
Yeah. And thank you, Anxious. Good to be back. I did enjoy the fact that, and this is nothing to do with Anxious, this is more all over the place, that I'm seeing more and more messages how people are actually standing up against extinct rebellion. They're called differently, but Extinction Rebellion, that's the one.
Yeah, I can't ever remember what they're called.
Well, it's just another eco-terrorist group. But you can't call them terrorists. I mean, it's not as if they're disrupting the flow of everyday life.
Hey, I just want to call them loonies. I think calling them loonies is...
Loonies are perfectly fine birds. Don't insult them. Hi, they're toxic. Yes, that got you quiet.
One was Extinction Rebellion, the other Equal Love. Yeah, of these, some people are more equal than other variety, I presume.
Yeah. Well, it's all... The thing is, they always come down... No, that's not true. John and I had a talk not too long ago about the whole environmental thing. And the problem is that we can see things that we can improve. Not so much need to improve, but can improve. So there is a point to be made when it comes to saving our environment. But it's nowhere near to what these communists or socialists or eco-terrorists want us to do. Am I saying it wrong, John?
No. I'm going, I'm agreeing and chewing.
Yeah, Schwarzenegger. That's Polish for bon appetit.
Oh,
which is French for eat well. But eat well doesn't sound right.
Well, the funny thing is it's also English.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm saying it's also English because there are actual French expressions that the French don't use. For example, if you make a smutty joke, we call it a double entendre.
Yeah.
And the French don't call it a double entendre.
No.
They go, a what? Even though it's a French an expression in English that uses French.
Yeah, but I know it as an English expression, not as double entendre, but double entendre.
Yeah, but that's about pronunciation,
mate. In English and one's in French.
No, that's about pronunciation. It's like in England we say tourniquet. In America they say tourniquet because they don't realise it's a French word and you should leave the T silent.
Yeah, but in the Netherlands it's called a tourniquet as well. And yes, Nick, I have seen it. It's pretty funny. More and more people are standing up to these eco-terrorists. First it was Antifa and Black Lives Matter blocking the road. Now it's the eco-terrorists blocking the road. People are getting enough of this bullshit. And I really hope the governments will start acting, because if the governments won't start acting, the people will start acting. And that's something I...
Yeah, and Anxious Aussie, I quite agree. They do not care. In fact, it's funny because I was arguing with Modwain about this.
Yeah, we were talking...
No. Let me make point. I was arguing with Modwain about this. My view is this. If they're that concerned with the pollution caused by the modern industrial systems, they must reject those systems and go back to a pre-industrial way of life. And I was listening to Simon Heffer, who's an English historian, talking to another guy on the channel, George Carswell. And Simon Heffer made exactly the same point. He said, if they were sincere, they would do their utmost. But instead, you just say, have you got an iPhone or air conditioning or any of these? Yes? Well, then you are actually part of the problem.
And we were talking about how there are genuine issues to deal with our environment. There are. Funny enough, they are being dealt with. I mean, I forgot his name again. There's this Dutch kid, and he's like 23 now, and he's the head of a corporation that is cleaning up the plastic out of the oceans.
Yeah, he found a way, yeah?
I forgot his name. Yeah, he found a way. Yeah, he did. I sent the link back there to John. Let me see if I can find it real fast. But anyway, the guy is like 23. He has his own company. Most people haven't heard of him. And he has a fleet cleaning plastic out of the oceans. And he can do this. Why can he do this? Because of capitalism. Because of free market. Or rather, free-ish market. Because, let's not be honest.
I've got it if you want it. A link to Wikipedia.
Yeah, I've got the company is called Ocean Cleanup.
The Ocean Cleanup.
Yes. So I went to the website of the Ocean Cleanup, and I'm like, it's a perfectly financially safe investment, or at least that's how it seems to be at this very point in time. This guy has done more for the environment than the whole of Extinction Rebellion and the whole of a lot of... he's done more for the environment than Greenpeace. And Greenpeace has been at it for 40 years.
Yeah, well, they'd rather get into fights with warships, don't they?
Sorry?
Greenpeace.
Yeah, Greenpeace was basically... Well, Greenpeace started out... I have to be fair. It didn't start out as an environmental movement. It started out as an anti-war movement that also had a little bit of a green issue in it. But funny enough, Greenpeace was mostly run by socialists.
Yeah.
And then the Cold War ended, so all the socialists went into environmentally... sound programs. That's why every environmental group advocates for socialism. Funny enough, this is why one of the starters of Greenpeace, left Greenpeace and is now speaking out against Greenpeace. Because he recognizes Greenpeace isn't about solutions, it's about socialism.
Yeah. But that's what happens. I mean, as Anxious Aussie says, half of Canberra's eco-terrorists are Antifa, because this is what happens. They invade a movement en masse, and all of a sudden their agenda, which is nothing to do with the ostensible purpose of the movement, is all that matters all of a sudden.
I'm not sure if they invade a movement or whether they started the movement, to be honest, because none of the environmental groups that I know of at this point in time that we hear of aren't socialist at the heart. the thing is, non-socialistic environmentalists don't have a platform.
Well, of course not.
So none of the environmental action groups are clean of socialism. It's not that socialism injected themselves in it. No. They start from socialism, and then they don a green cloak and pretend that they're all in it for the environment. Now, this is something that has been going on for more than 100 years, but in the last 30 years, it's going on overdrive, because back in the days, there were other ways to try and
virtue signal.
Yes. And it's not easy being a green leprechaun.
I mean, I mean, his previous photo said, I watched a media interaction where the plastic removal guy was mentioned as cleaning up the environment. The initial ER poster was basically saying, feck him, he's not doing enough. As opposed to that ER poster, who I presumably is doing a lot more. Oh, wait, yeah. I bet he isn't.
But that's the thing. Nothing is good enough.
No, but it's not just that. It's nothing other people are doing that's good enough. Even though all the people screaming about that do nothing themselves. Which was my point about how until they reject all the things associated with the pollution they're complaining about, they can go sit on a stick and swivel.
Yeah, and I mean it's like but we need renewable energy. Okay, well, then that means we need to break down oil production. No, not really. We need to replace oil production. I can understand that people say leave the oil in the ground. I don't agree with it, but I can understand people saying that. But even if we leave all the oil in the ground, we can make biofuel, which, funny enough, will also address some of the other problems we are having. Because another thing we were talking about is the soil erosion or toxification of soil. But soil erosion, one of the reasons soil erosion happens is because a lot of farmers don't do crop rotation the way we used to. Crop rotation had a use. It prevented soil erosion.
Well, it is what actually enabled the Industrial Revolution, which in turn has created the world we live in now, ironically.
Yeah. So if we do crop rotation better, one of the major crop rotation plants that I know of is rapeseed. Well, rape. I'm sorry, it's called rape, guys.
Yes,
it's
the plant is rape and the seed is rapeseed.
Yes, well, I said rapeseed because I'm pretty sure now that I said rape, YouTube will hate me again.
Yeah, but
the plant is called rape. I can't help it.
Sorry, I just have to say this. Fuck YouTube.
Indeed. Anyway, so if we then know that we can use crop rotation to make the soil more healthy, and one of the plants we can use to crop rotate is rape, and rape is very useful to create biofuel, we all of a sudden have the ability to make more biofuel. Now, smart people will say we probably can't make enough fuel to do everything. Yeah, okay, canola is rapeseed too. I didn't...
Yeah, but not in the UK. We call it rape.
Yeah, and this is English. Canola. I know canola, but I didn't know it was rape. Anyway, talking about rape culture again. Yes, Michael. Now, I know we can't make enough biofuel from rape. Fair enough. But we can. Because rape has the uncanny ability to grow in the most amazing of locations. So a lot of places where we now say we can't grow plants because the ground isn't good enough, rape probably would work, and it would actually help the ground recover. It's kind of funny because that means that we can also create rape in places like Africa, which has lots of places where they can't grow.
Well, I heard rape is the highest in Africa, so.
Yeah, but that's a different sort of rape.
Sorry. I'm sorry, this is a Saturday stream. Expect bad jokes. No, it's no, I mean the fundamental problem
actually,
is the
I'm sorry.
modeling.
Okay, go on then. But I want to respond to anxious. And it's incredibly land intensive. Yes, you're correct. It is. But we don't need to clear more land. The funny thing about grape is that you can grow it on places where a lot of other plants aren't growing at this moment. And considering that the Sahara, around the edge of the Sahara, is blossoming again because of the higher amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, which still isn't a lot because we're still only at 300 to 400 parts per million, went up about 50 to 100. Because of this, the edges of the Sahara are blossoming again. Now imagine if we could feed CO2 directly to certain places, which we can because we're doing this in greenhouses as well. So we can cultivate
all
it.
this misses the point, in my view, that the activist, because that's what I want to say. The fundamental point is that none of these activists actually, it's not about, the activism is not about the problem.
No, it's not about the activism. It's authoritarian.
No. I'm saying the activism. It's like this. You've got a bunch of people who culturally need something to make themselves feel virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
So these people, useful idiots, can be recruited to be the bodies in these protests, right? But how many of them actually know the first thing about the issue? Not many, I would suggest.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes them feel good. They're doing something by walking around a city as opposed to doing something constructive. But you're talking about people who's essentially, from their education on, have never done anything constructive. We have a huge segment of our economies, and I keep banging on about this, which is essentially parasitic. It doesn't do anything. You do things by making things, by generating, but they don't. They just, middle management and bloody focus groups and the media. None of these do anything.
No, I know. Well, I don't have a problem with middle management. This sounds maybe funny because you know what? You can be useful on a management position. I'm not saying that they are or aren't. I'm merely stating that they could be. But it's not so much whether they are or aren't useful. It's that the useful ones often are being silenced, actively being silenced.
The other issue is, if you're competent, you quickly rise to the top. So the ones who stay in middle management are de facto incompetent.
That might be true too, yeah.
There's a saying that you get promoted until you keep getting promoted until you get to the point where you're incompetent, because you then stop getting promoted because you're no longer doing a good job. So everyone gets stuck in a job they're actually bad at.
Yeah, falling upwards or failing upwards. Both of the terms I've seen used. I want to share this one with you guys because we were talking about this just a second ago. Wait a second, John. I'm going to try and share something on Hangout.
Okay.
And I'm really smooth at this.
I can share that with the world.
There we go.
Hang on. Let's see if I thingy that. And then I thingy that. Then that is now being shared. Daily Beast.
Yes, I know people will say, "Oh, it's only the Daily Beast."
No, I don't say it's only the Daily Beast. I'd say it's a Daily Beast.
I know. And the thing is, it's the same one. Can you remember last time we were talking about how wind farms will actually increase global warming because it takes away energy out of the wind, and the winds are one of the things that cool down global warming. Well, usually information like that is more readily available on non-mainstream sources. Mainstream sources often don't even mention it. Now, I kept this one for myself. I have found different articles about it, but this one to me was nicer because this image. I don't really know if this is the Sahara, but they are suggesting that this is the Sahara.
I'll tell you what, if they can do it in the Atacama, then I'll be impressed.
Well, the fact that it's happening at all.
Yeah.
But Stefan Kruppelin is.
It's the Romans' fault. It's the Romans.
Why?
Okay. To Rome, Libya, which is now mostly Sahara, was their breadbasket. It's where they grew their wheat for the Roman Empire.
True that.
And one cannot help but think that the intensive and consistent growing of wheat would not have done land any good.
Yeah, I don't think they would have done that, to be honest, because, let's be honest.
No, they did. Libya was their breadbasket of the Roman Empire. It's where they grew their wheat.
I know. But even after the end of the Roman Empire, Libya was still fertile.
I'm just saying it can't have done it any good. I didn't say it immediately led to it being a desert. I'm just saying it can't have done it any good to have had such a persistent monoculture for hundreds of years.
Well, probably not, but nature has an uncanny way of restoring itself pretty fast. Now, what we're doing wrong in the West, as far as I can tell, because I don't believe that we're still doing crop rotation, because we now use manure to feed the ground. But because certain plants take out certain minerals but leave other minerals, this is toxifying the ground a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you see, and this is where I go on an anti-capitalism rant. Okay. See, the fundamental problem is this: the concept of capitalism is, if you can make a product and sell a product, right? That's all good. But when it comes to agriculture, not necessarily, because what happens is they produce all these fertilizers, encourage the increasing of crop yields in the short term, without regard for what damage is being done to the land in the long term. And of course, the fertilizer manufacturers are going to do this because they're making money, and the farmers are going to buy it because it makes them make more money. But until you actually run this experiment over decades and actually see the long-term consequences, you don't know the harm it could possibly do.
Well, when it comes to crop rotation, we know why we did crop rotation.
I know. I'm just saying that the more modern techniques of fertilizers and so forth is has unfortunate consequences. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, and the thing. I'm not sure if grazing is actually better than cropping. It probably will be. Let's be honest.
Actually, depends, because one of the points the guy I sent Modwain a video of this idiot, but one of the points he made was this: when you graze land with sheep, the sheep eat all the seeds, which actually just turns it into a grassland, which can be much worse as an environment than whatever was there before. And therefore, grazing with sheep can actually be very negative.
Well, but it depends. If it's a crop rotation thing, it's not that big of a deal. Because crops are being planted. You don't leave seeds in the ground.
I'm talking about, like, say you had woodland, right? He was talking about, like, in the UK, we've got large segments of moorland.
Yeah, it's a bad thing because they can also eat feedlings and small plants that could turn into trees.
Yeah, I mean, it was talking about, as I say, you've got all these uplands in the UK, which are moorland, which are only fit for sheep grazing. And this guy was explaining something I didn't know, that the landscape is essentially a desert that was created by the grazing of sheep. That before it used to be woodland, and that the
Yeah,
woodland was a better ecosystem than the moorland. And to be
which
honest,
yeah,
probably. And also, a lot of this moorland is commercially exploited for grouse and pheasant shooting.
yeah.
And the grouse and pheasant, you should have warned me. I'd have.
Oh, sorry.
Everyone's now seeing a black screen. Um,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
yes. Thank you for popping in, Toxic, and enjoy your day in Asia.
Yeah, good luck, Toxic, and I hope the kids will have a nice wedding and all that.
No, they've had a nice wedding. It was yesterday.
Oh, they had a nice wedding. Okay, I will hope that they have a nice period celebrating their weddingness. That's not right. I don't know the right way to say it in English.
Well, they would normally say honeymoon, but I think
Honeymoon, that's the one.
that's not applicable in this instance, but I might be wrong.
Anyway, but yeah, Anxious, you're correct. A lot of plants propagate by getting animals to digest the seeds and then poop them out.
Yeah, but it's all about doing the right. It's not about saying grazing. It's about getting the right thing for the right environment.
Yeah, it's all about balance and to find a better way to deal with situations. But
and less homogeneity. This is what pisses me off. People go we do this. No, you do a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of the other. That's what an environment really is. It's an ecosystem made up of lots and lots and lots of differences.
Yeah. So the thing is, we have all this knowledge to do things better, but they're not interested in us doing things better. They're interested in us doing the things they want. And unfortunately, our politicians are siding with them. For example, in the Netherlands...
Parrots. Sorry, ludicrous. I thought it was parrots. I thought the coffee beans that were shut out by parrots.
No, they're shut out by cats.
Oh, okay. Well, cats are cool. Cool for cats, after all. That's an old Squeeze song, sorry.
Yeah.
No, they might not know this. The young ones might not know. Well, do we have any young ones? Probably not.
Probably not. That's not true. Oh, no, wait a second. We're no longer on my old channel. On my old channel, there were kids from work that sometimes watched the streams.
Oh, really?
Apparently.
Yeah. The ghosts.
Well, I don't think they watched it while we were live.
Ah, okay.
But they sometimes did watch it, which is amazing on my line. But I don't know if they joined us on this news channel. I doubt it.
Well, there's technically no reason why they wouldn't, because you put up a Cass. You put up a video saying we had this new thing, so they would be aware of it if they followed your channel.
Yeah, but I don't know how much they follow my channel, and I only put it out once. But you're correct; they can be here, which I have no problem with whatsoever. I wanted to say something, and now I forgot.
Sorry.
No. No, but the thing is, and we were talking. I mentioned politics a moment ago. The thing is, we know all this stuff, and somehow our politicians are steering into the wind of the environmentalists and trying to appease them when they're only in it to destroy things even further.
Okay, here's the problem, and I keep saying this about politicians. Here's the problem: there are so many issues, facets to society, things for politicians to care about. It's amazing they know anything about any of them, just on a practicality scale, right? Especially as the vast majority of them come from either legal, I think it's 50% of MPs in the UK Parliament are ex-lawyers. So they never actually learnt anything. They learnt the law. Well, that's not actual knowledge, is it? That's just the law and how to argue.
Yeah.
So the problem is they cannot be expert in all these subjects. And what seems to happen is they will then go, assistant, find me an expert, and the assistant tap 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 tap. Oh, here's the top expert from Google, and then that's your environmentalist who then falls them full of shit.
Yeah, that is true. And amazing, but yeah, that is true.
No, and that's how it works. And then once you start to get a consensus, it seems that the closed bubble of, say, in our case, Westminster, will perpetuate the views of that bubble. So you get these incredible groupthinks amongst politicians that are violently at odds with the population. And something has to explain that phenomenon.
Yeah. Well, in the Netherlands, we currently have a situation where our farmers are striking. They're upset because the Dutch government is blaming them for the too high amount of nitrogen in the air. I think it's called nitrogen in English.
Nitrogen is the biggest proportion of the air.
Yeah, it's
like
80%.
74%. No, it's 74%.
No, I've seen charts with 80
It's not
as
over
well.
80. There's 22% oxygen and 5% carbon dioxide. That only leaves 73%.
No, we went down to 20, a little less than 20% oxygen.
And 5% carbon dioxide still only leaves 75%.
We're nowhere near 5% carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is 0.003%.
I thought it was 5%.
No, it isn't. That's why I'm so amazed. That's why I'm so amazed that people make a big deal out of the fact that carbon dioxide is such a problem.
Because that's the narrative, and these people never actually know anything.
But I mean, they even. It's not 5%. No, indeed, because we know that carbon dioxide hits about 300. Parts per million. I'm not sure if 5% would be lethal, to be honest. I'm not sure how much 5% would be. Probably could be.
Okay, I've got it. I've got it. 78% nitrogen, so it's not quite 80. 20.9% nitrogen. Oxygen, sorry. So that is together nearly 99%.
Yeah.
And the rest is the fraction of the 1%.
Yeah. Well, not really, because nitrogen is based out of a lot of different stuff.
Nitrogen is an element.
Yeah, but no.
No, nitrogen is an element.
I know, but there are different forms of nitrogen, apparently.
No, they're isotopes, but it's still an element.
Fair enough, but there are different versions of it, because you can have nitrogen based on ammonia and nitrogen based.
No, ammonia based on nitrogen. Nitrogen is an element. An element is an element. It is an atom.
But it's not as homogeneous as it's not just one thing. Several causes can create nitrogen.
No, but nitrogen itself is an element.
Yeah, okay.
And so you've got the element of nitrogen, the element of oxygen, the element of argon, now the molecule of carbon dioxide, the element of neon, the molecule of methane, the element of helium, the element of krypton, the element of hydrogen, the element of xenon, the isotope of oxygen, which is oxone, and then you've got the molecule that is nitrogen dioxide, the element that is iodine, the molecule that is carbon monoxide, and the molecule that is ammonia.
Okay, I believe you.
Well, I'm just reading the descriptions of this page, and if it gives a single letter, that's an element, and if it gives a series of letters, that is a molecule.
Yeah, but that 80% isn't just one molecule.
No, it is. This says 78.084% is pure nitrogen. 20.9476% is pure oxygen.
Yeah, but things overlap because CO2 is carbon.
And then you've got CO2 as a separate figure. You've got methane as a separate figure. You've got carbon dioxide, monoxide as a separate figure.
The biggest the biggest greenhouse gas is water vapor, which is H2O.
Mm-hmm.
So
right. Hydrogen and oxygen.
Yeah. So yeah, funny enough though, because it is the biggest of the greenhouse gases, and everyone ignores it. It's only at 2% though. Funny enough, and its effects aren't that big either. It's kind of funny because I read an article not too long ago, and people are trying to explain what the greenhouse gases are doing. They sincerely think that the world is warming up because the Earth creates its own heat.
Yeah, well, oh dear. People are stupid. This is my point. This is what I said earlier, that the useful idiots don't actually know anything. They just know talking points and they want to feel virtuous.
Yeah, it's
as
amazing.
in the followers of every religion since the beginning of time.
Yeah, that's true. But it's amazing so far that because now in the Netherlands, because I started with this one, the farmers are protesting because apparently they are creating too much nitrogen. Which sleep well, Michael. See you next time, mate. Anyway, the farmers are creating too much nitrogen because in the Netherlands we do have draconic environmental laws when it comes to nitrogen and fine dust. But funny enough, we are far lower than every surrounding country. But if we are far lower than every surrounding country, it will up our nitrogen in the air as well.
Yeah.
Because
the air doesn't know about borders. It's funny that.
Funny that. Anyway, I need a fast bio break. I will be right back.
No, you'll be wrong back.
See you in a moment.
Sorry. Yeah. I've got to admit that my chemistry is rubbish, but even I can read a list which lists the elements and know which are elements and which are molecules. And nitrogen is an element. And there's a shitload in the atmosphere. Which is just as well, because if we had too much more oxygen, that would kill us. If we had too much more carbon dioxide, that would kill us. And funnily enough, when life started in the oceans, there was no oxygen in the air. I'm sure you all know this, but I have to say something while Modwain's away. And oxygen was a waste product, a toxin of photosynthesis. It's just that life evolved to exploit this toxic substance, and now most of life depends on it. But it was a poison way back in the day, 3 billion years ago or so, or maybe even only 800 million. I don't know. After the Cambrian explosion, I guess, or because of the Cambrian explosion or something like that. That was 750 million years ago, something like that. Just like yesterday. I remember when I were a lad, being that old. Yeah, sadly, because this is what Modwain was saying, oh yeah, we did crop rotation. And I asked him, I said, so why did we stop doing crop rotation? Because to me, that is the question. Because modern farming techniques fueled by the what do you call them, the chemical industry with all the fertilizer and everything, seems to have a lot to answer for with respect to how things have degenerated. because it's in their interest to get people using things that perpetuate expenditure, irrespective of whether it is actually good in the long term, even for the people engaging in that expenditure.
Anyway, I'm back.
Okay.
Nitrogen itself can't be used by plants, but nitrogen is used by bacteria in the soil. Indeed, thank you, Ludicrous. And one of the problems that the farmers have is because now, I'm sorry, I just took over. I'm sorry, what were you talking about?
John?
No, I can keep going. Are you still there, John?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just about to answer Anxious Aussie.
Okay. But indeed, nitrogen is something that the bacteria in the soil use to make the soil more healthy. But you need crop rotations, otherwise you get an imbalance in the soil. And imbalances are a problem everywhere. And one of the reasons we have this imbalance is because we create a lot of nutrition in the soil by using manure on it.
Yeah, and this is part of my point. You hear people say, "Oh, we can get greater and greater yields out of the soil," but it comes at a price, and we have to analyze the price.
Yeah, we can still keep creating greater yields, but we have to fine tune what we're doing.
Yeah, well, understand it for a start. This is the problem. Understand it for a start, not just say, "Oh, I can do it this year, therefore it's good," but actually say, "Okay, what's the consequences for 10 years' time, 20 years' time, and so forth?"
Which we now know. So this is something, and a lot of farmers have already been starting to do this. They're going back to crop rotations, not so much going back, but more of them are using crop rotation again in a better way than they used to do it anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, techniques can always be tuned, always improved.
And that's what it is. It's the fine tuning of certain techniques. And the farmers are saying, like, we're doing this. And in all fairness, at this point in time, a lot of the manure, obviously, cow poo and whatnot, is the cows that during the day are in the stables. That manure is all captured, and then it's spread out over the fields. Now imagine if they would spread it out in Africa.
Okay. You mean the European shipped to Africa? Because that doesn't sound brilliantly.
We still need some here, but we can use some everywhere to make other lands more fertile as well.
Yeah, but they do have cows in Africa, so they could use their own shit.
No, not enough. They simply that's a problem. They simply don't have enough. Africa is huge. People always seem to forget how huge Africa is.
No, we know. No, we know how big Africa is.
We
could Mercator projection, because it shrinks Africa proportionately to the northern and southern pole.
Yeah, that is true. But it's a huge place, and so we can bring manure there. Not all of it, because we still need some here. We can use manure as a fuel for our electric ovens. For electricity creation. Well, we don't want to use coal. Okay, we can use manure.
I still think we should make SJWs run a treadmill for power production. I'm just sorry.
Yeah, but they won't create that much, unfortunately.
Yeah, but they got wind power in their favour, being vegans.
Well, they can create, give them enough
more.
They can create
greenhouse gases.
Yeah. Well, out of all the greenhouse gases, methane is the most effective one, apparently. It's not the most
exactly, common. And it's the one produced by vegans. So
true that.
That's why they don't like cows. Their solution is to turn everyone into methane producers by making us all vegetarians. It's amazing.
Yeah. Makes you wonder why you're in it.
Because they're idiots. Okay. Can we just settle this once and for all? They're in it because they're idiots.
Yeah, well, they're the red guard. I've been starting to use red guard when I respond to people who are obviously socialistic, Bolshevik,
Red Guard?
communistic. Yes, the red guards were the youth
No, 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 no.
supporting.
Sorry, you just said use the red guard. I
Yeah,
didn't
the title
understand
red
what you
guard.
meant.
So when people like that are going on and on and on about, I just say, yeah, you know what, you're right, Mr. Red Guard, or stuff like that.
Yeah, no, but do you know the problem is?
Anyway.
I can almost guarantee that goes straight over the head, so they don't
Oh,
understand what you mean.
They have absolutely no clue. They think it's a joke. Well, I'm not a red shirt. I'm not from Star Trek. Yeah, that's not what I mean.
Yeah, so I'm saying they just will have no understanding because they are historically illiterate. This is proved by the fact that they believe what they believe.
True.
So I heard this thing, and there was supposedly this wonder soil in the Amazon. And the thing about this wonder soil is if you spread it amongst regular soil, it turns the regular soil into wonder soil. Has anyone heard anything about that? Was it me?
Never heard of that. Never heard about that, but it could be true. There's all sorts of people who believe stuff like that.
No, but here's the thing, right? So the point about this soil was it had a particular microbial makeup. That meant that, as I say, it was very resistant to depletion, and if you put this soil with other soil, it turned it into the same type of soil, presumably because of the bacterial composition. And it was, it's like rather than, but I suppose the thing would be because it's natural, it's not got the same commercial exploitability, which seems to be the fundamental problem with capitalism is it only goes for something if there's a profit to be made, not because it's a good idea. And this is why I always bash the pure free marketeers, because the pure free marketeers don't understand the best solutions don't win. The most profitable solutions win. And they are not necessarily the same thing.
But the thing is, eventually, the best will win. Well,
no, it won't. This is my point, and we can prove it.
If it can hang on long enough, it will. And when we're talking about stuff that goes about the environment.
No, because we know. Okay. We know. We've got it. We've got the history. We know what happens in history. Commercial interests suppress good solutions if those solutions threaten their profit margins.
Yeah, but again, in farming and whatnot, this is why nearly whole of the world hates Monsanto.
Yeah.
Because Monsanto is trying to close down the farmers' market, so to speak.
Yeah. But the point is they're still the biggest company and they still dominate the market. It doesn't matter whether people hate them. We still all end up buying their products or the products of their products.
Well, more and more farmers are turning away from them, it seems. I hope this is true. And I know, to go on what Anxious said in the chat, it's all about the microbe and the bioactivity in the soil. This is true. I have a friend. Well, friend is a big word. I know someone, and he knows me as well, that is actually a worm farmer.
Yeah.
He farms worms. He catches the excrement of worms, sells it as special manure. He breeds worms to be shipped to different places to activate soil, because the worm go in there and they survive for a while, and their poo actually feeds the soil. Actually, worm poo is better manure than cow poo, apparently.
I bet it is.
But it's also not as common, so to speak.
Well,
sorry, go on.
No, I'm just saying it's like you've got a big cow, right? Because where I used to live, when I lived up in countryside, I'd go walking. I always loved going walking, and you'd go walking. You go across fields, and the fields were the fields of cows because it was a dairy farm.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say, picking a path amongst the cow pats, particularly when they were fresh, was a challenge at times.
Yeah, indeed.
Because cows are big creatures. Okay.
True.
And so you're going to take a lot of worms to compensate. But I also remember when I was at school in the same region, and they had this thing. It said, right, so you I think it was a meter squared, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you did this trick with washing up liquid. So you put it into this area, and then you count how many worms come out. And for a meter squared, it's a fuck ton of worms.
Yeah, that's the problem. But at the same time, some animals produce better materials. And this sounds silly, but worm poo is far more useful than cow poo.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There's more worms than you think, is what I'm trying to say. You were saying there weren't so many worms, and I'm saying, but there were actually more worms than you think.
But still, for example, a kilo of worm poo is easily 10 times to 15 times more effective than a kilo of cow poo.
Yeah, and I can believe it.
And that's something I found mind-boggling. The first time I learned about that was actually, I like rabbits, right?
Indeed.
It doesn't come up often, but I do. Rabbits breastfeed their infants as well because they're mammals, just like the rest of us. They have by far the best breast milk, the most nutritious breast milk of animals out there, any animal out there.
Uh-huh.
They feed their kids only once per day.
Uh-huh.
And it is more than enough. It has so much nutrition, considering the small packages of it, so to speak. And I never realized, because I always thought, oh, well, yeah, milk is milk is milk is milk. And there might be a small difference in this and that, but not a huge difference. Well, there is. Now, if this is true for milk, and later I learned this is also true for manure and for pee. Funny enough, pee is also important.
It's true for pretty much anything. I mean, it's true for meat.
Yeah.
It's true for, which is what we're made of. After all, meat is muscle.
True.
Yeah, I mean, what struck me was listening to about the life cycle of bears, right? Mm-hmm. And a bear will eat a lot of food, fatten themselves up, and then hibernate. And while they're hibernating, they live off their fat.
Yeah.
If we try to live off our fat, it would poison us.
Yeah, we'll die.
Because when we release fat, we release toxins.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when you don't eat enough, you go onto your reserves, you use 50% fat, but also 50% muscle. That is to say, our metabolism is inherently different to that of a bear.
Yeah.
Because a bear has evolved to live off its fat, and we haven't.
Yeah. But and it's scary, really, because we know there are so many answers out there, and capitalism, but the market can find so many solutions, and it does, but these solutions aren't good enough for the eco-terrorists because it's not what they want.
Well, no, but this is my point. They don't care about the environment; they care about the politics.
Yeah.
Which is why the Green New Deal is really just socialism.
It is. And it's not just socialism. It's socialism whilst destroying everything we have.
No, isn't that just socialism?
No. Socialism destroys everything we have because of socialism. The Green New Deal is destroying everything we have and also turn to socialism, which will destroy everything we have.
Yeah, that's what I said. So it's the same thing.
No, it's not, because where socialism destroys things in a period of time, I mean, it took Venezuela 10 years to completely collapse.
Yeah, but that's no time at all, historically.
True, but the Green New Deal will do it in a year. Not even. I mean, can you imagine any country in the Western world not able to use fuel? Everything will collapse the day we stop using.
I mean, there isn't even there aren't even words to describe that level of stupidity.
And yet, still, they advocate it as if it's a real thing.
This is my point. Who's suggesting it? Somebody who did a supposed economics degree and then was a barista has done nothing of value in her life.
Yeah.
Anyone can suggest anything and say it's brilliant, but it doesn't mean it. That there's any connection between it and reality.
Yeah. So yeah, there is that, and it's worrying. It's worrying.
Of course, it's worrying. But the point, you see, okay. I mean, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. My view is that socialism is a symptom of industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
There wouldn't be modern socialism without industrialization. And I know Toxic says perfectly valid point that the concepts go back to Plato.
Yeah.
But it is not unironic that the unusual circumstances we find in our Enlightenment societies today were perhaps most similar in the past in the Greek republics.
No, not in the Greek republics only. I mean, the Roman republics as well.
No, but particularly the Greek republics, in terms of the association between the conditions that create an unusual intellectual freedom, right? And so the fact that these ideas actually, which are authoritarian, only thrive, but authoritarian of a particular nature, only thrive under freedom. And this is the great paradox of it all. Because it's like Anxious Aussie was doing this stream last night, as I say, and she showed this insane woman. We are so oppressed. We are, I'm bisexual. Blah blah blah. As if that's ever been a problem for anyone ever. No. Okay. The bisexuals have never been oppressed. Sorry. And it's like, oh, we're all under such threat. We're all. She can only say it because we're free. She can only have her platform because we're free. And yet she's saying how bad it is, but can only say how bad it is because it isn't bad. And
that's an old joke, though. That's an old joke.
But this utter contradiction and irony and the very fact that they have a platform refutes their argument.
Yeah. But this as I said, this is an old joke. People in America and people in Russia talking about how good their land is. Oh, well, the American says, oh, man, you don't know how bad you have it in Russia. We have it so good, I can actually criticize my own president.
Yeah, no, I know the joke.
Russia says, well, that's okay, though, because I've got the same. I can criticize your president, too. They're completely able to see that people in China or Venezuela are perfectly allowed to rail against capitalism, and they are able to rail against capitalism. See, it's equal. Yeah, okay, try to rail against socialism. in those countries.
As I say, it's like.
But they don't see it like that because they think it's all the same.
Yeah, and it's like who was I listening to? I think it was Douglas Murray on Brett Weinstein. They're talking about what's happening in China. Somebody on some stream, or maybe it was no, it was V and Sticks Hexenham, and they were talking about what's happening in China, and it's about the camps and the sudden arrests and the treatment, etc. And yet, these things happen in so-called worker states. Well, in worker states, you're not allowed to join a union.
No.
Using the incredible logic that because it's a worker state, it is naturally for the worker. So if workers want to collectivise and object, they're against the worker. And it's like, okay, 1 second listening to yourself should tell you why the system is broken. Okay. And it's like, as I've again said many times before, in the early 1980s, the entire labour movement in the UK hated communism. We supported Solidarność, because if you support a workers' uprising against a communist state, it by definition means the communist state is wrong.
Yeah.
So communism is wrong. And to me, this was so obvious. And yet here we are, nearly 40 years later, with all the so-called sane people now loving communism. I mean, what the fuck? Jesus wept.
Yeah.
Bezmenov, he wasn't, he was predicting the future. They had literally subverted the belief system and turned the supposed opponents of the system into its advocates.
Yeah. Yeah. That is true.
No, they have. They've taken the whole revolutionary youth concept and turned it into actually perpetuating and expanding the status quo. But all through the guise of opposing oppression, which doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, you can't talk about how oppression exists in socialist countries because...
No, I'm talking about here. I'm talking about here. Here they've turned the youth into the people who perpetuate the system, but in the guise of opposing oppression. But the oppression they oppose doesn't exist.
I find it so funny when people like Ocasio-Cortez or Ilhan Omar in America start talking about how racist America is. And I'm like, you got into government. A racist country wouldn't allow people into government that aren't part of their selective race.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
somehow...
This is my point. The only reason any of these people can say what they say is because the thing they say is untrue.
It's wrong. Yeah. Yeah. And it's...
Because in the systems, if the systems were anything like what they describe them, they wouldn't be allowed to say it. They would be disappeared. They'd be interned and tortured and executed.
Floating in the sea naked a few weeks later, which is happening in Hong Kong as we speak.
Yeah, because it's not enough to be punitive. You have to be seen to be punitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe the UK shouldn't have released Hong Kong, though. What do you think?
No, actually, it's a weird thing because that was all done under the law. What always amazed me was how the Chinese, despite the communist revolution, abided by the treaty.
For a while.
No. They abided by the treaty. They waited until the contract they had signed with the United Kingdom under the threat of violence, but they waited it out, and then when the time came, they just took it back. When, let's be honest, if communist China at any point since the Chinese Revolution had wanted to take back Hong Kong, they'd have just walked in and taken it.
I'm not sure.
Of course they would. I'm talking about as power.
Now China is a world power.
No.
But
No.
10 years ago they were.
No. During the Korean War. Okay. During the Korean War, we're talking the 1950s.
Yeah.
The US broke the North Koreans and went all the way up towards the Chinese border. The Chinese said, fuck that, and drove them all the way back again. Not the Koreans, the Chinese. And that was in the 50s, because they always had so many troops. They always had a massive army because they're such a populous country. They always had bodies, and they've always been willing to sacrifice. So if the Chinese had wanted Hong Kong, they could have just walked into Hong Kong. Well, not walked because it's an island, but you know what I mean. They could have just taken Hong Kong, but they didn't. They respected the treaty until it ran out, and then there was a proper legal handover. Now, as I say, I was always, like impressed by at least that aspect of respect for. Okay, we were for. Yeah, I mean, let's consider this. You take your average SJW, right? Your average SJW will reverse consent on a sexual act. Right? So they have no respect for what was agreed at the time.
Okay.
But the Chinese government, even though they were forced, they called it gunboat diplomacy. England waged the Opium War. Britain waged the Opium War on the Chinese. We were pretty shitty, right? But even though we forced them to lease us Hong Kong, they respected it until its time was up. You imagine your average SJW. The minute they come to power, they'd be going, but you forced us to do it. It wasn't valid. So say what you like about them. They at least respected the law.
No, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, here in nuance is the point. You have to point out the good things as well as the bad.
No, you're correct. You're correct. Fair point. But by doing so, China is active all over the world.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese are horrible. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be nice about the Chinese, but I'm not going to turn around and say every single thing they've done is bad.
No. That's not the point I was trying to make. But most of the horrible things they do are based within law as well. So
that's the problem with the law. The law is only as good as the laws, if you know what I mean.
And the ones applying it. But if they then themselves turn back on an agreement, they open the door for agreements to be broken with them as well.
Yeah, but but here's the irony, right? Okay. So if you ever study European history, and you look at the history of treaties, they
can break them again.
I mean, the frequency. I mean, you look at someone like Henry VIII, right? And he'd sign this treaty with this country, and then 3 years later, that treaty with the opposite country against the first country. And it's like, what the fuck? Because literally, treaties weren't worth the paper they were written on.
Yeah. It's
just asking Native Americans what value treaties were. The sad fact is, when it comes to treaties, it always ends up as might is right.
Yeah. Well, in the Western world. I mean, this is something that indeed China is doing different. But in Europe, might was right. And indeed, Paolo, as you said, in Dungeons and Dragons, that's what lawful evil is.
No, I know, Richard. This is precisely what I was talking about.
I
am not defending the Chinese, and they're doing some terrible things. Okay.
But I wouldn't say they drove out the Europeans. The Africans drove out the Europeans.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. He's saying the Chinese are colonizing the African nations, and it's the African nations that drove the Europeans out. Yes.
And then because they fucked up their own country, they are now basically open the door to the Chinese.
The problem is that Africa was colonized by the Europeans in an age when it was done militarily.
Yeah.
No one colonizes militarily anymore. They colonized economically.
True. But there are a few countries that actually are doing well in Africa now.
Yeah, because
and the countries that are doing well are the countries that didn't break away from the colonial powers in a negative way. And the ones that did are all going to hell in a handbasket. Then again, the other ones are probably not doing that great either. Botswana is doing pretty good.
Well, yeah, these things are complicated. This is the problem. And the world seems to hate nuance and complexity and, the fact that it's less that there are good and evil than people look out for their own interests. The problem is when an entity, whether it's a state or a business, whatever, becomes large enough, suddenly it is unconstrained by opposition from pursuing its own interest in ways that are inconsiderate of the interests of others. Because people are considerate of the interests of others because others make them be considerate of others.
Mm-hmm.
And this is true of anything, because we're people. That's how we are. That's our nature. We do our own interest. On a small scale, it's good. On the same behavior on a large scale is bad. Even though it's exactly the same behavior for exactly the same reason. The difference is the respective balance of power and the ability to do what you want without opposition.
Mm-hmm. True. China offers to help Africa, enslaves everyone in everything but name. It's true. But yeah, Africa is their own problem. I mean, they destroyed the infrastructure. They're massively leaving their own countries. I mean, look at Zimbabwe. I keep saying, when it was Rhodesia, it was the breadbasket of Africa. And since it's Zimbabwe, it had more famines than Rhodesia had before that. And it hasn't been Zimbabwe for that long yet. It's beyond me that people keep sending money to help these people when really
financial aid is a disaster.
Yeah, it made things worse.
Well, it makes more than things worse because it's exactly the same reason for opposing welfare. You make people dependent to stop them relying on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, if you give them financial aid, you undercut local businesses and undermine local businesses.
Yeah. And you know what? Paulo gives a great example. Angola, Portugal left in 1975. Their capital still has buildings with broken elevators since 1977. You know what? I'm 100% willing to believe that. Because, hell, look like a country like South Africa. South Africa, 20 years ago, it was before it became the rainbow state. So it's a little bit more than 20 years, I think. It was, for all intents and purposes, equal to any Western country out there other than their apartheid, sorry, not apartment. They stopped their apartheid, and they've actually been on a societal decline since then. They have problems they didn't have before that. For example, not enough drinking water. They were able to make drinking water out of seawater. But they fired the white engineers that did it because, hey, we need to be diverse.
Yeah. No, I mean Alison Tiemann did a great video, right, which talks about this, right? And Alison Tiemann, the founder and head of Honey Badger Radio.
Okay.
She did an absolutely brilliant video on this, and she describes this whole process, and she explains how just giving people financially oriented aid where they don't learn and have the incentive and motivation that comes from it being yours, right? Because if you give something to somebody, they don't value it.
Yeah.
Which is part of what is the malaise of our affluent civilization, because people don't value things, because we don't know, you know, the base level of affluence is so high. And take it from me, as somebody who's now not working, it's like you don't actually need a lot of money. You do by historical standards, but you don't actually, you need a fraction of the regular standard of living if you don't do things like have to commute to work every day.
Yeah, that takes a lot of costs out of the whole thing as well.
Is that the one, Richard? Yes, it was a brilliant video, and she was explaining about how there's this organisation set up, and they went into Central America, and they would do projects, but they didn't give money; they loaned money and expected it being repaid, and they didn't do the engineering; they taught people to do the engineering. So when something broke, they fixed it themselves. And because it was their own, they were motivated. And they didn't expect somebody else come in and wait for them to come in and fix it. And that was successful. Yeah. And so giving, this is a point, and I keep saying this, it's human capital, that is experts going in and teaching people and giving them skills and knowledge they don't have to then do it for themselves. You know, the whole give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he'll feed himself forever. You know, it's that principle. And the problem is the whole aid culture is about giving, as in money, not about helping people become self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Because if you make people self-sufficient and you are an aid organisation, you're making yourself obsolete. And the problem is any of these publicly financed bodies in any sphere, the last thing they want is to make themselves obsolete, because what they're going to do next, they haven't got any transferable skills.
Yeah. But this, it is somewhat it's somewhat funny. But the main reason societies break down, it seems, is the welfare state, and the main reasons why African countries keep failing is because we started pumping welfare into them far more than we pumped into our own countries. And still we keep pushing the welfare ideology. We need to stop welfare, basically.
Yeah, we need to, you know, it's like, I remember, I think it was Blair, and it was, we're going to do ethical foreign policy. We're going to give all this aid. Okay. And how did that work out? are there any fewer famines? Are things any less wars? Is it any better? Because if the answer is no, then that approach fails. It makes you feel good, but this is the fundamental problem with all of that politics. Is it's all about what you say you do and gestures. It's not about actually doing anything.
True, and as you say, anxious. We should stop letting the smart ones leave the country. Yeah, that's true too. We should be very careful with migration and immigration.
Well, even in Europe, I mean, V talks about it. He says, when he stopped being a doctor, the average pay was 300 euros a month for a doctor in Romania.
Yeah,
and he says the problem is they have so-called free education. That is, the taxpayer pays, and then immediately bugger off to go and earn decent money abroad. Yeah. So Romanian taxpayers are subsidising the health services of foreign countries. And then we have one of the Remain arguments for Britain is, well, we couldn't run our health service without foreign doctors. Yeah, because we're stealing them all from countries like Romania.
Countries that need them bloody self.
And have paid for their training.
It's kind of funny because when we're talking about planned market economies, which basically is what socialism is, planned market economies only serve one purpose. Up prices. And funny enough, in the Netherlands, for example, we have a shortage of psychiatrists and certain doctors. Now, why is that? Because there's a cap on the amount of doctors that are allowed to study. Sorry, I need to rephrase that. There's a cap on the amount of doctors that can become a doctor while studying for medicine. There's only so many spots in medicine studies. They limit the amount of physicians being brought to the market like this.
Why?
Now, if they would say only the smartest people are allowed to become doctors, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm 100% with that. I agree. But at this point in time, there are people who are capable of becoming doctors. That they score pretty high, they're smart enough, all of that. But we have a lottery to see who gets in.
So why is that? What's their excuse?
I have no idea. I seriously have no idea. But if you want to have an example on how planned markets fail, this is one of them. There are more people who want to do it, but they're not allowed to. And at the same time, we're short of certain doctors. So we import them from other countries or...
there is another side to that. So there was a very popular TV series in the UK called Silent Witness. It was about pathology and how this pathologist managed to basically solve all the criminal cases they were involved in. So they get a body and they would determine the cause of death, and they'd be highly involved in the investigation, and so it was very glamorized depiction of the work of a pathologist. And so the number of people studying to be pathologists rose to the thousands. There were 10 jobs a year.
Yeah.
Because there was no connection between the demand for the job and the provision of courses. And this is one of the problems, because why should the universities care? People come, they want to take this course, let them take the course. Not their problem that there is no demand for this course. Once qualified, and that's the opposite side of artificially restricting the numbers who can study, is not paying any heed to the need to study.
Yeah. But the thing is, if they make things free, they should accept people's choices.
No. But here's the thing, right? It's not free, and there should be a cost to studying.
Oh yeah, no, that's not true. That's not what I meant.
No. I'm
You,
just saying there should be a cost to studying because
Mhm.
you need. Okay, when here's what happened to me. I went to university after school and dropped out after 2 years. I was not a good student. I got a job at the time, and it was relatively early in the days. I worked with computers, but I hadn't studied, so I didn't know anything about them. I'd never owned a computer.
Mhm.
So I went back to university. And for the first 2 years, because I'd had 2 years of university before, I had to pay.
Mhm.
At that time in the UK, studying was free. It's not anymore, but it was at that time. But I had to pay because I'd already had my first two free years, right?
Mhm.
And I worked my frigging ass off. I came top of my year in my subject, right? Because I
Mhm.
valued it. First, I wanted to study it because I'd already worked in the subject and knew that's what I wanted to do.
Uh-huh.
But also, because I was partly paying for it, I valued it and I worked hard and I did well. When I got to the end of the 3 years, there were several people I knew who said, I wish I hadn't been so uh, look, no, that's not the right word. I wish I'd worked harder and got a better degree. Because basically
Yeah.
they'd had a good time because they'd gone straight from school. They didn't really value it. They didn't understand the role of what they were doing. Okay. And they
Mhm.
had no investment or incentive in it because it was all at that time provided free by the state. Now, I'm not saying we should have the system where people are saddled with insane amounts of debt, especially if they're studying useless degrees, purely to get numbers through the higher education system, because, that seems to be a proportion, I'm not saying all, a proportion of what's happening now. So the question is to draw a balance. You should only
Yeah.
study a degree if you need a degree, if it actually is relevant to what you're going to do.
Well, but that's the funny thing. In the Western world, we want a degree for everything. Hell, I'm probably not even able to do the job that I've been doing for 20 years because now I don't have the degree that normal people have in this job.
Yeah.
I never had. I just have 20 years of experience. That's not true. I have more than 20 years of experience, but I worked there for 20 years.
No, but
Before.
worse. Okay, so take the British police, right? We all know how bad the British legal system is. So it
Mm-hmm.
used to be you'd become a police officer, a copper on the beat.
Mm-hmm.
So you would actually do police work
Mm-hmm.
and then you'd rise through the ranks. Whereas they decided to fast track graduates. So people come in at a relatively senior level, in superintendent or something, right? Inspector, superintendent level, never having done the job. And then they're put in charge of people whose job they don't even understand because they've never done it.
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah.
have senior ranks full of all these academics who have no idea what they're actually talking about.
Yeah.
And the point is not that you shouldn't have education, but you can't only have education. You also have to do the job and understand the job and have real world experience.
Yeah. Yeah. This is why I'm kind of thinking that maybe I should pick up and study psychology. This is something I wanted to do for a long time. Maybe I should start doing it someday. Who knows? But this is beside the point. This is about me.
No, I mean, but this is the irony, because it's this whole personal political. Because in a sense, everything personal is political. It's just not the way that slogan tends to be represented.
No. But yeah, the scary thing is, how do you call this? Politics is downstream of culture, and our culture is fucked up.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to really do something about that.
Because we have this huge parasitic class that
Yeah.
goes straight from education to higher education into useless jobs that produce no value.
Yeah.
And especially the huge numbers of them who live off the state. You know, I think the first solution is to get government out of education, higher education. I mean, schooling is another problem, but higher education.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, exactly, Richard. Exactly. Yes. I've asked this question of Modwain and Toxic Threads a little while ago. Are the educated more stupid than the uneducated? Because I actually think in many ways they are.
Depends on what education, to be honest.
No, but I mean, the point is there are ideas so stupid only the educated believe them.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. If you're talking about social sciences, then yes. And I know I work in a field that is considered social science, but trust me, if I look at the average psychologist, the stupidity is mind-numbing.
The point is the worst ideas present in society would not exist without this useless intelligence.
Yeah. But if we look at, for example, the stems,
yeah,
there, no. I mean, these people aren't stupid. They know what they don't know.
But that's different because they're actually educated as opposed to propagandized.
Yeah. I mean, for example, if I talk about the CO2 bit, we talked about it earlier. You said, well, so much percentage is CO2. No, it's far less. Okay, but I've always been told blah, blah, blah. Fair enough. You hear the difference. You accept the difference. Mm-hmm. I was wrong. Done. Yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the point is, if you accept that we can all be wrong, and by we, I am part of we, that is not a problem. Because I give a figure, you say, no, it's much less than that. I do an internet search. Oh, shit, I was really wrong on that.
Yeah.
And then you move on. The point is, you move on. We don't argue about it. We don't certainly don't get abusive about it.
It's not a point. But when I talk to, for example, colleagues at my job, there's so many colleagues who are like, no, that's not true. No, that's not true. Oh, okay. Well, it's true, but I don't care. Yeah, I'm sorry, but you're not thinking. It's the same thing with this whole green thing. Well, the science is settled. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Can you prove it's not? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of proof. Yeah, but they're fake. Well, I'm sorry, but if that's the way we can go, then we can never prove anything. Yeah, but the science is proved, and the science is always peer-reviewed, and peer-reviewed means it's perfectly safe. Okay, have you seen the grievance studies? They were peer-reviewed to prove the point.
No, but there are subject differences. I would trust the physics peer review far more than gender studies peer review. Well, I wouldn't study a gender peer review.
Yeah, but sorry, when it comes to the environment, the same thing is happening. There's an Australian publisher, and I forgot its name, but it's a publisher of peer-reviewed studies. They flat out refuse to post peer-reviewed studies that prove climate change is a hoax. They flat out refuse to post anything.
Oh, sorry. AFK a moment. I need bios.
Yeah, well, I needed bios too. All right. No, but there is something seriously weird in our society when we keep saying that the science is settled, when the most important thing about science is that it's hardly ever settled. That's what makes science science. I mean, okay, if we all believe something is something, it becomes a theory. It only becomes, how do you call it, a law when it's actually settled, when there is no way ever to doubt it. And that only happens a few times in the history of mankind, that scientific theories became a law. Well, you cannot even comment if you mention denying. This is the funny thing. And the worst part is they talk about global warming. And the fact of the matter is, I believe in global warming. But for the longest time, they were talking about man-made global warming. I don't believe in man-made global warming. And then they removed themselves from the discussion for a few seconds. And they came back and they stopped calling it man-made global warming. Now they just call it global warming. But they still claim that the other side doesn't believe in global warming. Well, first off, there is no question of belief in science, because if you're talking about belief, you're talking about religion. And second off, I absolutely see that there's global warming. I 100% say it's not because of men. And therein lies the riddle. Yeah, attitudes are indeed getting a bit medieval, and they are.
No, no. You call it medieval, okay? This is the point I tried to make a while ago about ideology. It just seems an innate part of most people that they need to understand the world through a certain simplistic narrative. And if there aren't other simplistic narratives, they will create new simplistic narratives.
Yeah, true.
And so the solution to bad simplistic narratives is to create better simplistic narratives, no matter how discomforting that is.
Yeah.
And here's the problem, right? So it's not that there has never been a time that people haven't spoken the truth. It just never mattered.
Yeah.
This is what's sad, is the narrative perpetuates no matter how many people point out that it's bollocks.
I'm sorry, Richard. I do not understand what you mean with "the get sacked." You have to clarify your sentence there, because I don't know what you mean, mate.
Maybe the whiskey's kicking in.
The whiskey?
The whiskey.
Oh, whiskey.
The whiskey, and suddenly his typing's gone doolally.
So there is that.
Yeah, exactly, Paolo. I mean, the Earth changes temperature over immense geological time.
Yeah.
It's why we have ice ages. It's why it was reckoned we're in an interstitial. That is a relatively warm period of the current ice age. And that is why it was expected we were going to get cold again. But the problem was that the timescales involved are in hundreds of thousands of years, but people said, oh, it's going to get colder again, let's panic. Thus you had the panic of decades ago when everyone was fearing an ice age, because they just heard it's going to get colder again and thought they meant next week.
Yeah. And it's funny, but people still fail to recognize that we are actually in an ice age.
Mm.
And the worst part is, and I didn't realize this, I mean, I found this not so very long ago. I know how much CO2 is in the atmosphere. I know that the Earth has seen more CO2. What I didn't know is that there have been geological warnings. CO2 is dangerously low.
Mm-hmm.
Our CO2 is so low that it might actually kill the plant life. And when that happens, guess what?
It'll release CO2 and thus create more plant life.
So we should release more CO2.
Yeah, but this all comes from oversimplistic thinking.
True.
This was my point. It's, these variations happen over time. They reckon there was a time when there was what they call it, a snowball Earth.
Yeah.
There was a time when the level of oxygen was much, much higher, and so you had these giant insects because they could get enough oxygen to grow to much larger size.
Yeah.
The point is,
we couldn't survive then.
No, we wouldn't survive. We'd die with that much oxygen. The point being is that the Earth's environment is inherently unstable.
Yeah.
But people won't accept this. But it's, and I know this might sound a tangent, but trust me, it is the same point. Okay. So, one of the points I make as an atheist is I keep hearing religious people say how constant religion is. And then again, I'm listening to this discussion between Douglas Murray and Brett Weinstein. And they're talking about how much religious belief has changed in the last 100 years. How the religious morality of 100 years ago was fundamentally different. To me, this is blatantly obvious, right? The values of a religion are not a constant. They are driven by changing social values.
Yeah.
To me, this is obvious. And yet I have communicated with people who are convinced they are absolutely static, that they are given in the Bible and therefore immutable.
Mm-hmm.
And my point with this is there are people who are morons who do not look at, let alone understand, the past or change. That whatever is now is perfect. Even though we are just at a random point and it was different before and it will be different after.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember hearing about the flips of the poles. Have you heard about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It happens every once, a few 100,000 years?
Yeah, every few 100,000 years. And it was like, I mean, I haven't heard this for decades, but it was like, and no one knows why.
But it suddenly does, yeah.
But it suddenly flips. So you suddenly get the North Pole being the South Pole and vice versa, right? Magnetism reverse. Presumably, as a consequence of some shift that's happening in the iron core, right? Because at the end of the day, what causes magnetism?
Yeah.
Presumably, it's to do with the motion operating in the molten iron core. Because isn't that what causes magnetism, right? And so, okay, eventually there are these very, very slow, 100,000 year long, let's call them Browning motions, that when they reach a particular point, flip the poles, the magnetic poles, right?
Okay.
And it's like, oh, these terrible things will happen when the poles flip. Okay, whether true or not, I don't know. Okay, but that's just what happens. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, if that happens, it will happen.
Yeah.
It's just what the Earth does. Because we just happen to live on it. And yet everyone is so fucking anthropomorphic. They think that everything is about us.
But that's the worst part, though. When you talk to these climate change bullshitters, they sincerely believe that men are the most impactful creature on this planet.
But women are the most effective.
Well,
Sorry,
obviously.
I couldn't resist. I apologize.
Yeah, obviously. But I mean, I always thought that the sun produced more energy in a day than we used in a year. The whole world uses in a year. I've seen calculations not too long ago that says no, 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 no. The amount of energy the sun pushes on this planet in an hour is more than we use in a year. And when I say we, I mean humans combined. I'm sorry, but how are we more powerful than the sun? Yet people are blatantly believing this. Well, oh no, no, well, no, yeah, but man-made man-made climate change. Yeah, I'm sorry, but we're still not producing anything as much as the sun is.
No.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
As I say, people love the simplistic narrative. They like the simple cause, the simple effect. And nothing is simple in reality. And people go, la la la, I'm not listening, not listening. My narrative.
Yeah. It's beyond. It's beyond reality, really.
Well, as I say, we have a problem in that enlightenment had led to the decline in religion, which had led to a reduction in the ability of many people to feel virtuous. Because people could be pious and therefore have a sense of virtuousness for no effort. So now they need another way of feeling virtuous for no effort.
Yeah.
And so they go to things like environmentalism because, I mean, did you film the Manchester Aussie? Because I saw another video with the people in London with the amazing costumes, right? The red costumes. I think they were all women. They look like all women. And it's like, for fuck's sake, how much effort did you put into that? If you put a fraction of that effort into actually doing something constructive.
Yeah. But that's, I mean, Greta Thunberg gets invited to talk in front of the United Nations. Yet, what's his name again? I can't remember. Sorry, I had to look it up real fast.
Anyone sensible?
Well, I mean, Boyan Slat, which is a terrible name when you speak out in English, but okay, Boyan Slat is the guy who creates the Ocean Cleanup Company. He doesn't get invited. Now, he's been busy since 2014, 2013, and they are still officially in a test phase. But the latest test in in June 2019, they started a new test. And apparently the model they are using now, or they're hoping to be able to use on a big scale, is already able to get microplastics.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, seriously, how is this guy not being propped up as an environmentalist?
Because he's actually solving it.
Yeah. But then the problem is, environmentalism isn't about the environment.
Yeah,
It's about
I know. I tried to make this a settled point.
I know, Johnny. You're coming at the end, mate. It's really time for us to call it quits.
You quitter.
I know, but have you seen?
He's a quitter.
I'm not there. You do 2 streams of an hour. I'm here. We have to continue.
Yes.
We have good streams, though. That is true.
because we're actually prattling on with this one.
And indeed, Richard Beyer, Anita Sarkeesian spoke at the UN.
Yeah, along with that. What's her name? Oh shit! Why can't I remember her name? The vile abuser who spoke with Sarkeesian.
The one that started Gamergate.
Yes.
I forgot her name too, but I know who you mean.
Yeah. Who
Oh,
caused a man to kill himself through her false allegations when she was the abuser?
yeah.
Zoe Quinn.
Zoe Quinn, that's the one.
Yeah, and what gets me is she went to the UN with purple hair
Yep.
and then goes, but they victimise me, but they call me bad things. That's because you're a cunt. Okay?
Well,
We call you bad things because you are a bad thing.
yeah, she is a bad thing. I wouldn't call her cunts. Cunts still serve a purpose.
No, they don't. Not in Australia.
If they hadn't complained about boobs in video games, none of us would need to know who Carl Benjamin is. Probably true. And
Yeah,
he's from the cut.
no, but can I be fair about Carl Benjamin? He has his good moments, and he can be a twat.
He's just a human.
No, but here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? So they no, actually, I heard he started through atheism. Well, I heard he started through atheism, but
I'm
maybe
not sure.
that's not true. I don't know. You hear conflicting things. I've only been on the internet for less than 4 years, so
it's not an open night, by the way, Richard. These people are there on invitation by the UN.
Yeah. But no, I mean, we're told, okay, that everyone who likes someone like Sargon is a fanboy and can't criticise them. I've been criticising the twat since I first encountered him because the way he speaks, he's a twat, okay?
Well, I wouldn't call him a twat. I mean,
no, he is. He uses specific ways of language. He calls people cucks and beaters. I hate that, right?
Oh, okay.
I hate that because it is belittling to the very people who are already belittled by the people he's supposedly attacking, right? Secondly, Jordan Peterson, again, I have said this consistently. The man is batshit crazy when it comes to religion, okay? The guy is insane. But he is great. He's great on the social issues. But when it comes to religion, he's an idiot. Okay.
The thing is, it's a completely different example. But I'm a fan of Sargon. Fan is a big word, but I like his work. I'm a fan of Thunderfoot. The two of them had a spat.
Oh, I don't like Thunderfoot. I'm boring as fuck.
I like him. But either way, the fact that they two disagreed means nothing to me. I don't always agree with Thunderfoot. I don't always agree with Sargon. And I know Thunderfoot is a scientist where I am not. But in all fairness, his knowledge on the environment is lacking. Now, we find ourselves both in the same camp. Man-made climate change is not a thing. But he misses certain points that I already know. Does that make him suddenly a bad person? No, it's not his main article. It's not his main field. He is a scientist. He has more knowledge than I will have. But when it comes to climate change, he doesn't know everything. The same is true for Sargon. I had Sargon on a stream back in the day when I did streams with, they're terrible me. Now I forgot his name. That's a long time ago with Tom Sequitur. I have no idea what happened to Tom Sequitur. We haven't seen him for years. But back in the day when I did streams with Tom Sequitur, we had Sargon over once as well. And we were talking about the Roman Empire and how things were done. And I knew stuff that he didn't. So I, corrected him. Which he accepted perfectly fine. Because he's a human. He understands that he doesn't know everything. I understand that I don't know everything. The same we had earlier today when we were talking about the CO2 thing. We are all humans. We understand that we don't know everything.
Unless you're an SJW, in which case you know everything.
Anyway, I need a fast bio break again. I'll be right back. Sorry.
He won't. He'll take ages.
No,
But,
I won't.
sorry, you ruined my joke. I know a lot about genetics, but very little string theory. I don't think anyone knows anything about string theory. In fact, they can't even agree which string theory. I think there are dozens of them. And the logical conclusion of the most popular one is nothing exists. So that's not very good. Yes, Sargon and Thunderfoot was about Brexit. Exactly, that's my point. It's the minute you become ideological about something. No. Sorry, Richard. Richard, the only real twat is not the son of a 5 Benny Hill. Sharon Osbourne, Jess Phillips, these are real twats. Okay? Absolutely unconscionably awful human beings who have no redeeming features. And yet, oddly, Sargon defended Jess Phillips a bit. And I do not know where he gets that. Yeah, exactly, ludicrous. That's my point. Self-interest is not an intellectual position. It's just a dishonest motivation. It's like there's a guy called Grim Jim who Modwain has tried to get on several times to the stream, and he's like, I don't agree with Brexit. So many of my family members will be affected. Well, guess what? So will so many of mine. My brother lives in France. He's lived in France for 35 years. His children were all born there. Technically, his daughters are immigrants, okay, because they now live in the UK. One of them is married to someone from Hong Kong of Egyptian heritage. So yes, these things affect my family too, but that doesn't interfere with my principle. My principle is the democratic vote, which I voted against. I voted to remain. The mea culpa, I was wrong. But the point is, once we voted to leave, you get behind leave. That's a democratic. That's a democratic process. You accept who won, whether you like it or not. He lives in the Czech Republic, I believe, Paolo Thunderfoot, and he works in a European institution. Though ironically, Christy Winters lives and works in the UK, which is dead awful, as I too live in the UK and do not like the thought of sharing my country with her. Yes, that was called The Talk, and that is the Sharon Osbourne, and she led it, and that is why I think she's a disgusting human being. That is the precise. No, I've got a Fruisley bar because I haven't eaten. Sorry, anxious Aussie, I was rattling. But yes, that was the precise moment I was talking about. Here's the thing, right? No men would ever talk about the mutilation of a woman on a panel show. No men would ever laugh about the mutilation of a woman on a panel show, and no male audience would ever laugh about the mutilation of a man on a panel show, let alone any of the men on the panel ever having any kind of life after that. Yet Sharon Osbourne not only led the laughter about the man being mutilated on a panel show, not only did her audience all laugh, but there were zero repercussions about Sharon Osbourne doing all that. And she's unapologetic. So, yeah, she is a, of all the people I would spit in her face if I ever met her. She is that disgusting to me, and there are like 2 or 3 people on the planet to whom I feel that. But honestly, that was so vile. What she said, what she did. It is not funny to see a penis in a waste displacement.
I'm sorry, I had no idea what this was about.
We're talking about Sharon Osbourne being a vile cunt.
Oh, right. Well,
And not the Australian kind of cunt, which is nice, but the worst kind that is vile, disgusting, and deserves having their face spat at.
there are some women that, but they do have the freedom to speak.
And this is my point. She got zero consequences.
Yeah, because she's not saying stupid stuff that the left doesn't agree with. Or true stuff that the left doesn't agree with.
No, I would ludicrous. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't have, it's like there are all sorts of people I don't agree with. There are all sorts of people I'm opposed to. But there's very, very, very few people I hate. I hate. Because that was vile.
Yeah.
Yes, anxious. It was a deadly insult.
I mean, let's be honest, Richard. Ozzy may have been a decent musician once, but at this point in time,
He was never a musician. He was a vocalist.
Well, fair enough. But I've seen people with dementia who are clearer than he is.
Hey, the last album I got of his was the mid-80s, Osmosis, and up to that point, brilliant. After that, I have no idea.
Well, and trust me, I've seen people with dementia and Korsakov that are still more coherent than he is.
Yeah, but think how much. To its credit, Ozzy Osbourne has always admitted that he is amazed he's still alive.
Yeah. True that. I don't think it's a bad guy, but it does explain Sharon Osbourne, I think.
Yeah. I mean, basically, she nursed him through a drug-fueled couple of decades.
Yeah.
There's a joke about if you remember the 60s, you weren't really there. Well, apparently that was the 70s and 80s for Ozzy Osbourne. He does not remember.
Yeah, true that. Well, anyway, we're at the 2-hour mark.
We are.
We are. And
how many drugs in boatloads, or do you want a bigger unit?
No, he just went for all of them.
Yeah, he's done all of them. But I listened to Lemmy talk about Hawkwind. So Lemmy was in Hawkwind before Motorhead, and he was fired by Hawkwind. And he was fired by Hawkwind for unreliability. They were in Canada and they had to go to the United States, and he missed the transfer. But he was explaining all this, how they were all on these different drugs, and some were on uppers and some were on downers, and these created different moods, and the moods didn't get along very well. And there were times when Hawkwind were like 10 people. It was not like a regular band, 3 or 4, 5.
Richard, it's not so much about the articulation, but it's the things that come out of his mouth. Now, in a song, he's doing great, but I mean, in a normal speaking sentence sort of thing, he loses the point he was trying to make by word 3 of the sentence. So yeah, there is that. Doesn't mean the fact that I still agree that he's a great musician, vocalist. Sorry, but yeah, he. I think he had his best days a long, long time ago.
Yeah, but I mean, as I say, this Black
Oh,
Sabbath
I agree.
started in 1968, 51 years ago.
Yeah. And he didn't live the cleanest of lives.
No, he lived the most unclean possibly of lives.
Yeah, I understand. Anyway, where the fuck are my drugs? Anyway, I was thinking, let's call it.
Yeah. Okay.
Great stream. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Johnny, next time, please be on time, mate. Who knows? You might have something to say that makes us think about something differently as well.
Can I just say about the singing about Satan? That was all a publicity stunt.
Oh, aye.
If you actually listen to the Black Sabbath stuff, which I understand mostly came from Geezer Butler, because there was a tension between the direction of Geezer Butler and Ronnie James Dio when Ronnie James Dio was the vocalist. It was
Dio
all
made great-
actually, oh shit, there's evil in the world and I hate it. So when he turned into, hey, I'm the devil, I'm really evil, it was all a publicity stunt because it was utterly the opposite of everything that had happened in Black Sabbath. And he only did it when he was a solo artist in the early 1980s.
Yeah, because it's sold.
Because it's sold, because it's publicity stunt. Because all of a sudden, heavy metal was this Satanism thing. And it was just a marketing angle. No one gave a shit. Yes. Generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses, evil minds that plot destruction, sorcerers of death construction. In the field, the body's burning, while the devil's wheel is turning. Satan, oh, I forget the words now.
Yeah, I like Black Sabbath too. They have some good songs. I'm not a huge fan, but yeah, they have some good songs.
Yeah,
Anywho,
good songs. I love Black Sabbath. I listen to them all the time. I do.
Anxious.
And I saw them in
I haven't seen them
82
live. I have to admit.
Ronnie James Dio, vocalist. I saw them for the Modwain tour, and it was awesome. And the bass solo by Geezer Butler was out of this world.
Okay. I believe you. I'm, in all fairness, I like Dio more than I like. See, now I'm getting old. Forgot his name again. The other guy. For fuck's sake. I like Dio more than.
Yeah, no, I loved Ronnie James Dio, but then I knew him from his Rainbow days.
Okay, I can't remember that.
Oh,
anyway,
Ronnie James Dio did the first three Rainbow albums.
John, sorry, because before we leave, Anxious, do you have a moment to join us in the Hangout? We don't have to be live, but do you have a moment to join us in the Hangout? And now we have to wait for an answer.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, it's the lag. I mean, it wasn't as bad in the old days.
just to let you know, I can give her the link privately.
I know.
No, you didn't know if you knew.
I knew because you did last time.
Well,
we've invited.
I've slept since then. I'd forgotten about that. So.
Okay. Does that mean I can levitate now? Levitate what? Okay, so anxious. John can give you the link to the Hangout.
If I
John,
can find the right window.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Boomers are us.
Hey, I'll get my bus pass in 2 years. Don't think I'm kidding.
We don't have that in the Netherlands, though.
Once you get to 60, you get a free bus pass. And I will be 60 in 2 years. So there you go.
Oh, congrats. And it's kind of funny, when I was doing my education back when, so like long ago, let's call it long ago, they were talking about whether we should make public transport free in this country. And people decided against it. Oh, sorry, dear, can you turn off the heating because it's really it's really warm. Okay, thank you. What was I saying? Oh yeah, they were talking about whether they should make public transport free because it's already heavily subsidized anyway. And they decided not to.
Mm-hmm.
I can't for the life of me remember why. But the difference
because it's
between
insane.
Well, not really, because by subsidizing it, you make it 100% free. But the way we're doing it now, you still have to pay rather a bit of money.
Yeah, no. Okay. Having lived in the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire, they had a great policy because they used the high inflation of the 70s and 80s to just simply not raise the price. So it became cheap, but it was never free. And it worked brilliantly.
Yeah, no, fair enough. You can make it cheap and not free. But at this point in time, public transport is fucking expensive. But you know why it's fucking expensive in the Netherlands? Because when you use public transport, you're also paying for the moments that you're actually not in public transport. Because the buses and the trains that run when there's hardly any passengers still need to make money. Therefore, the price of the individual user goes up. But if you would just subsidize everything, then the price would be low. You could still make a price.
As I say, they did it. They did it in my home city of Sheffield, and it worked brilliantly. But you have to do it as an integrated strategy, because what you do is you design the whole transport system around public transport. You get people off the road in their cars, but that then frees the roads for the cars that are left. So everyone wins.
Yeah.
It reduces accidents, which reduces healthcare costs.
Yeah. And all you have to do is stop making public transport
too expensive to use on a per journey basis.
Yeah.
It's all about the marginal cost of a journey. When you have a car, you spend a lot of money irrespective of how much you use your car. Because you buy the car, you insure the car, you tax the car, etc. Right? So that's all sunk cost. But the marginal cost is just the cost of the fuel and a small weighting towards the service costs, right? The problem with public transport is if you make everyone pay the full cost every journey, each journey costs much more than a journey in a car. Even for one person, let alone multiple people. True. So who's going to use, and the car's much more convenient, so who's going to use public transport? So you have to say, no, you've got to change the economic model for the public transport to be more like that of a car, which is you pay a lot anyway, but then the marginal cost is much lower. And then people will use it because the two marginal costs are more equivalent.
At this point in time, if I go by car for any city in the Netherlands, if I go by car or by public transport, car is slightly more expensive than public transport, but it is more convenient because I decide how to drive, etc., etc.
And you don't have to get to and from the terminal.
Yeah, but here's the funny thing. When I go somewhere in the Netherlands together with my wife and kid,
It's much
My
cheaper
car-
to use the car.
it's way cheaper.
Yeah, yeah.
So how are they going to compete? Well, they're not. I mean, even if I'm on my own, it's roughly the same price, but I'm buying convenience by using my car.
Okay, so Johnny's list says it sounds like socialism, but here's the issue, and this is why it's not socialism. Okay, I live in the southeast of England. The southeast of England is insanely congested. Everyone uses a car because there are no practical alternatives.
Hi there, Anxious, by the way. She's in Hangout now.
There are no practical alternatives because everyone uses their car. It's a vicious cycle. The
I've just been sitting
only
here
way,
quietly lurking.
the only way to have more, the only way to have a sustainable number of journeys is to be more efficient in how you move people.
And I need to point out one thing, and it's a very important thing. Johnny, there's a huge difference between social and socialism.
Yeah.
And a lot of people seem to fail this because they seem to think that everything that is social, therefore, must also be socialism. It seriously isn't. That might be a good topic for next time.
Yeah. I mean, the point is there are pros and cons either way. I would never, because of where I live not far from a station into central London. I would never take the car into London because it makes no point. But guess what? Do you know what is the most heavily subsidised transport in the United Kingdom and always has been? That's right, the railways into London.
Yeah. Anyway, I am sorry, but we did say we would quit.
Yeah.
And we're starting a completely new topic.
As we do.
As we always do.
We just can't bear to say goodbye. We just can't stand to leave you.
But I did ask Anxious to come here because in the Hangout to talk to her, because we were talking about maybe doing a stream on the runes, which is also a very interesting topic. So I wanted to see if I can fine-tune that, but I didn't want to do that in the Hangout. But I also don't want to leave her waiting. So shall we call it quits?
It's okay. It's Sunday. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, and it's nice and early for you, you lucky bastard.
True that.
Tooting Broadway. So, if anyone doesn't remember, and Richard Bayer should, Citizen Smith was a British sitcom of quite a long time ago. And he lived at Tooting Broadway, and he was the archetypal middle class socialist. That was the joke. That was literally the joke. So he was a lodger with a very down to earth working class family, and he was the intro theme always ended up the revolution.
Well, Richard, I know that everything in the world has an end, except for sausages, because they have two.
Only sausages have two?
Two ends? Yeah, I think so.
No. The implication, what you said is only sausages have two ends.
As far as I know, yeah. But
Bookends.
I'm not saying...
Bookends. Bookends. There are always two bookends. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you... Okay, but yeah. But a book only has one end.
No, a bookend is an object you put on the end.
Yes, I know. And we in the civilized world, we don't call them book ends. We just call them book standards.
No. Whose language is it? In our language, they're called bookends.
It's Germanic, so there you go.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yes,
it is disputed the origins of the English language, and many scholars do not consider it fully Germanic and consider the roots pre-Roman.
Yeah, that's to say that there are many scholars who consider male and female brains equal and the same.
Of course they're equal, but they're not the same. Equal but different.
Yes.
I know a
So
song
that you
about that.
find a scientist who says something stupid, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And if you
Ooh.
keep quoting them,
Anyway,
yes, I'm going to
People,
press
thank you.
end stream any second now, and then I'm going to attend to the biology.
Thank you for joining us for this good fun. I have to admit, I wasn't here for 2 whole streams, and I did miss it. I'll not lie.
Yeah.
It was good fun to be back.
Okay. Good night, everyone.